All right. Welcome to Entrepreneur's Handbook Chat. We've got Stephen and me here today. So today we're going to jump straight into it and talk about all things newsletters. So for those of you who don't know, we're moving our newsletters to Beehive. And that was before they just announced that they've raised 12.5 million in their Series A. So in 2023, some people think that email is dead. I don't know about Stephen. Like everyone keeps saying email is dead like every few years or so. So why are companies still investing in platforms like that, and why are we moving our newsletter across to them as well?
Yeah, good question. I'm possibly the wrong person to ask for in that sense, as I have tried newsletters twice with my audience, given up twice, and I'm now back for round three. Although I'm using Substack for my list, but
why are you back though? If you failed twice, why are you still persisting?
I think for myself as a content creator, I think there's lots of chat about owning your audience, and I think when you're on a platform, so for example, I was writing a Medium, when it's going well, I think it's quite easy to ignore that advice because you're doing well on the platform. But I have discovered this year that when the platform sort of seems to start favouring you a little bit, you're at the mercy of many factors that are out of your control. So I think the main thing is owning your audience, isn't it? And being able to make a direct relationship with your audience, which seems today, especially in this sort of new AI era that's about to turn up, I think this is going to prove sort of what separates us.
Yeah, I think it's
the whole separates the winners.
The whole TikTok and Instagram stars where you see it all the time, right? Where they lose access to their account, or they get hacked, or this happens or that happens, right? And then all the algorithm stops favoring them, or they get shadow banned. Then all of a sudden they're so dependent on one platform, which, like, let's face it, Meta doesn't necessarily care that much about individual creators unless you've made the big time, right? And you've got no real recourse, right? How do you get your account back? It's difficult. There's not that much human support. Whereas if your email list, you can export it, you can keep it safe, you can have it offline if you wanted to. And I think it's some good, especially I think writers tend to know about it. A lot of writers will think about, like, okay, I need to have an email list. But other types of creators, I think, are just wising up to it now. Like, say, YouTubers, Instagram people, TikTokers. And it's only sometimes when they feel that pain, they realize actually it's really important to have this other channel that is reliable, right? And it doesn't matter how much things have changed. Like, all of this new technology, all these things have come out. Email is the oldest of all of them, but it's still the one which is most reliable. And it's funny in that way that all that innovation, that there's still not a platform that's really better than email to guarantee people are going to see it. And another stat here as well is that, let's say on Instagram, right? Let's say you've got 100,000 followers. On average, maybe a few thousand of them, like probably low single digit thousand, see each post. On email, if you've got a good email list, you've got 60% open rates. So that conversion, or that number of people that actually engage with you, is so much higher on email. If you post on LinkedIn, for example, you see these people with hundreds of thousands of LinkedIn followers who get a couple hundred of likes on their posts, right? And that's the difference, is that 1,000 email subscribers is worth way more than 1,000 of anything else on any other platform to me.
Yeah, for sure. I think I was just about to say Twitter might be even worse than that for like your actual organic reach. It's interesting though. I think it's the same to you off there. With so many emails sent out to everybody, including spam, including marketing. Why do you think people still choose to send emails as a content creator, as an entrepreneur, when I'm always assumed at the other end, people were sort of wanting to reduce how many emails came into their inbox?
I think it's that it's harder to get into somebody's inbox, but the fact that you've got there means a lot more. Because, like you said, like, people don't want to get tons of spam emails, right? So it's a much more conscious decision. Following somebody on LinkedIn, following someone on Instagram, you can do it quite mindlessly because it's not going to just take over your feed. Whereas an email box, people are much more protective. So again, it matters more. And even then, I say I follow probably about maybe 10 or so newsletters myself, maybe a little bit more than that. And if I stop reading one, then I do unsubscribe but the ones that are in there, I know them very well. I look forward to them every week of like, okay, this is happening this week, right? Or you kind of know that schedule. And I think it's because you've got a bit more control over it, right? You can unsubscribe. You can do that. Whereas even on say LinkedIn, Twitter, that kind of stuff, even if you don't follow somebody, they can still end up on your home screen, right? It happens to me on Instagram, right? Where it's somebody who maybe I don't want to follow, I'm not really interested in what they're doing, but they keep coming up on my homepage because I know people that know them or because my friends have liked their posts. In email, that doesn't happen, right? In email, the only people are there are the people that you want there. Or like if anything unwanted just goes to your spam box.
Yeah, no, interesting.
And
I think on you go.
With the business side of things as well, so like they've just raised 12.5 million, right? And Substack have raised nearly 100 million so far, about 90 million. So it's companies starting taking this bet of, is this the new place? Because I don't know about you, I think a lot of people have invested in the creator economy in quite apps that nobody's really going to care about. Whereas it's interesting that the money is now flowing back into email. And Beehive is the one that stands out to me because of the stuff they've done. I was talked to their team, like full disclosure, and how quickly they've allowed different users to grow, right? So the Milk Road went from 0 to 250,000 in a few months, and they sold that business for tens of millions, right? Beehive enables you to do that. You can't really sell an Instagram account or another account for that kind of money. I don't, at least I don't know of that happening.
I mean, yeah, and even then, I think, as you say, because you can't guarantee deliverability or sort of engagement, I think you can't sell a social media account for as high a number as that. And you just said that you spoke to the team. Why do you think that happened on Beehive and say not on MailChimp or not on ConvertKit?
Yeah. I think there's interesting things. Like I've spoken to Nathan Barry as well, the founder of ConvertKit, right? Great guy as well. I think one of the things about newsletters is that there's so much innovation all the time, right? And it's so the Beehive team are the guys who built Morning Brew. So they've got a lean team, it's agile, and I think they're very focused on what they're trying to achieve. Whereas it's almost a problem once a new company gets too big in the user space. Sometimes they try to be too much to do too many different people. And say, for example, in MailChimp, it was the early people in the doors. Lots of lots of people a bit more advanced in their careers might have only heard of MailChimp if they don't know the newer competitors. So I think what happened there is MailChimp will then stop innovating as much because they don't need to. Whereas Beehive has very much got the audience of the people who are like the trending people right now, right? That's who's using Beehive. And even like Substack, for example, Substack was very hot. But again, it's attracting a lot of people who maybe are less advanced, whereas the people in the know are going for Beehive a lot of the time. And it's just interesting to see that. And what I like about Beehive is because they have that speed where they're actually adjusting, they're actually listening to what customers are saying and trying to adapt their product based on it. But they've also got that experience of really hyperscaling a newsletter, which I think a lot of the other companies don't necessarily have for a solo creator or for a small business or startup. So that's why I think Beehive is better for them.
Interesting you compared it to Substack there. Do you think they're quite similar? I've always had it kind of in my head that Substack does just try and aim itself at writers. Maybe that be journalists, maybe that be bloggers, or they maybe used to write in Medium. Maybe that's their target, whereas Beehive is definitely like also catering to businesses.
Yeah, I think Substack is interesting because it's that kind of hybrid platform, right? Because it's kind of semi-medium, but also a newsletter because it is a platform you can just browse it as blogs, right? And it's interesting because like I don't necessarily do that myself, but obviously I have a lot of customers, a lot of people are into that. But what Substack doesn't offer is a bit more of the actual underlying newsletter functionality that if you really want to grow and scale a newsletter that's not just based on writing, then you don't have the referral schemes, you don't have some of the more innovative stuff that Beehive is doing. But it's also depends on what your audience is doing, right? I think if you're in that startup space and you've got an innovative audience, right? It's people that are fast moving industries, then Beehive might be better. Whereas if it is more traditional media, more traditional concepts you're talking about, then that's where Substack might have a better discoverability engine than Beehive does for people who don't already know about you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just spoke to somebody who worked in Substack the other week actually, and they said to me that nobody uses the what would you call that? Like that homepage, discover page. They basically say that it's no one goes on to Substack.com and then tries to find something to read. Is what they're discovering.
Yeah,
So
which
that
is a
would say
challenge.
to me what you just said. It's now more of a newsletter platform, perhaps, because it's not treating itself as a blog with a homepage that recommends publications to you based on what you follow.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned this in your news last week, right? About Meta creating a Twitter clone or something like that. And I think this is one of the problems that a lot of the different platforms have, is that they try to do too much without being very clear about who they're best for. And I think so. So, for example, Beehive is very good at what they're trying to do, and Substack has been a bit broader. But now, if they're trying to now be a bit clearer, again, that helps. Medium had the same problem, right? Medium tried to be too many things to too many different people, which meant that nobody knew what's the best thing for anymore. But I find that whole I don't know too much about it other than reading your newsletter about the Meta clone for Twitter. Can you explain a bit about that? Is it Project 92?
Yeah, correct. They're calling it Project 92 for now. I don't know how long that name will last, but there's been leaked screenshots of the product, and it's Twitter. It looks the same. We've got like buttons, we've got comments, we've got retweets. So obviously they'll not call them that. But I think, well, I was just about to ask you there that I would say Beehive is in a way a copy of what existed so far, and then they've just now taken maybe certain features or a slightly different approach. And I think that's a good form of imitation. Sort of maybe could say they've been inspired by other platforms.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this version from Meta, I think it maybe looks more like they were hoping that Musk's version was just going to explode. Remember, there's all that chat that like the platform is going to go offline. They sacked all the servers and all that. I wonder if they just made the call there to think we can sneak in the back door and just have our own version of Twitter, because it seems to me to be lacking any kind of innovation on top of what exists already. And in most cases, that will fail. If you're not going to add to what exists already, I don't have much hope for that one.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a challenge, right? Because it's say with Instagram Reels and TikTok, right? Is that it's basically a clone. Like Meta does this a lot, right? They just clone other people's products. So adding stories, all that kind of stuff. But with Instagram, the Reels worked because they already had a large audience of people already on Instagram, and they added it to Instagram. So you didn't have to change too much user behavior, right? Whereas if they've got a separate standalone app that's a Twitter clone, how many people are going to sign up to it? I don't necessarily know, because why would those people move across from Twitter to if people are going to move back? People boycotting Twitter is because if they don't like Musk or they don't like the content guidelines, right? It's not like Meta has a much better reputation for that, right? Like you're not going to move to a Meta version of Twitter because you want your privacy to be safe.
No, correct. I think also you need to use your Instagram credentials to log in. So I think that, someone like me is trying to avoid using a Meta account, basically. So that, I think, rules me out of using the app. The one thing I did notice, which is interesting, is that it's going to be on a decentralized platform, back onto that buzzword.
Yeah.
The same one that Mastodon is on. So in theory, your following is not owned by Meta's platform, which could make an interesting sign of things to come, perhaps. If, again, all the networks would have to go into this protocol. But as we just said, David, being able to take your email audience, maybe the future of these platforms is going to be similar, that you will actually own your audience and can say, right, I'm done with Project 92. Now I'm going on to Twitter. And I'm going to take that whole data bundle with me and start again.
I think the challenge there, though, is that some people who use Project 92 on the same people who use Twitter. So if you bring them across, but they're not checking the other app. So it's because email box is because everybody checks the same email box. It's just a different way that you look at it in a way, right? Of how it comes to you. Where there'd have to be a platform which, Well, I guess if they did it that way, where I think they compete too much on features to enable you to do that in some ways, because a lot of the features, say for Beehive versus ConvertKit, it's not necessarily for the end user; it's for the creator themselves. So if the end user, they just receive in the same email box, regardless of what platform they use. Whereas it could be more like, for example, with Reddit, right? Where Reddit had the different apps for posting to Reddit. Even then, they're consuming Reddit data as well. So, yeah, I just don't know how that would work, because it'd have to be quite a big shift in user behavior to make that happen. And then with
could well just be a gimmick, couldn't it? Could well just be a gimmick to try and make it seem that it's been innovative in some way.
Well, Meta would never do a gimmick, right? That doesn't sound like them at all.
Yeah, correct. You just touched on it earlier. I was going to say that strategy is called copy, acquire, kill. Is what they call it. So if Meta first tries to acquire, which I believe in the early days of Twitter, it did try to buy Twitter, and Jack Dorsey, I think, rejected and then they attempt to copy the features in order to kill the business. So I think behind the scenes, they're hoping this is something that could kill Twitter. But I mean, obviously, as you just mentioned, the Reels there never kill Snapchat. Certainly not kill TikTok. So
yeah, it's interesting. Like with the newsletter side of things as well, is that I think, for example, in the UK, right, people don't appreciate newsletters as much as the US does. I think the US is far more mature in that kind of market. There's a lot more newsletter creators as well. But it's interesting to see like how many people have grown newsletters very quickly in a short amount of time, which usually wouldn't think is possible. You think you'd have to have a platform like Instagram or LinkedIn or something like that. And obviously what's happening is people using those platforms and then generating those leads towards the newsletter. And I think it's a modern technique that people just aren't making enough use of. And I guess what's the key benefits of that, right? Why do people bother with newsletters? And if you look at, for example, our audience, right? If our audience is all entrepreneurs, and you can guarantee that 1,000, 10,000 people, whatever it is, are going to see a message, then that sponsorship is worth a hell of a lot to those people. Whereas with a Instagram account or another account, you're just not sure. And as a business owner, when you know that most people you're going to send the email to are going to at least open it, that's a huge difference. That's why a lot of people should be focusing on email that maybe aren't. But at the same time, I think, well, I guess, what do you think most businesses get wrong with their newsletter, right? You probably receive quite a few and probably unsubscribe from quite a few as well. What should businesses be doing to make sure that they actually have a newsletter that people open?
I think a big thing is personality, right? So it's the same with content online. If your content reads the same as all the other newsletters, then there's no purpose for your newsletter. There's no reason for it to exist. So I think it's about trying to incorporate your brand's personality into your newsletter. Like I know a lot of the Morning Brew newsletters can use like a meme as the sort of picture, or they have people creating really interesting artwork. A lot of the titles are quite like play on words, lots of puns, and it makes it very approachable to read. You mentioned Milk Road earlier. I've only just recently subscribed to that, but I'm assuming there was something quite unique about their content or their brand, because that seems to be quite a huge leap.
It's that friendliness, right? And that informality is that too many businesses are trying to be so hard to be formal, but the audience would rather be spoken to like a normal person. And the brands that are able to do that well, say Morning Brew, Hustle, you read any of like Milk Road, it's a very chatty style. And I think a lot of businesses get it wrong. They're trying to be like really formal and authoritative, but that's just boring. Like you're not going to read an email like that, right? Whereas if you're reading an email, it flows really well. It's fast to read. There's puns, there's memes, there's jokes in there as well. You can get your message across about your business in a much more softer way. And I think that's what a lot of people miss out. Is like you can actually make it quite enjoyable. And let's say you've got a business which is selling microphones, right? But if you every week are giving valuable information about microphones, but also saying like dramas about microphones or like fun things that's happening about microphones, or in the audio space of like, can you make it exciting? And a lot of people can't. And if you don't have that strategy of how can you make this something which people read for fun, then it's not going to work. And you've got to have some kind of entertainment value to your newsletter, I think, in the modern day, right? So if you look at most of your newsletters doing well, is that can they combine that, like actually giving insights, actually giving useful information, but in a way that people like reading?
Yeah, interesting. I think you've nailed that on the head there. Yeah. I was going to ask you, you just mentioned about, so if someone was going to start a newsletter today, you were talking there about sponsorships. I know with what you're doing at the BHQ as well, you've had your head in the weeds with sponsorships. What kind of money can people make from sponsorships, and what sort of data points do they need to be hitting? Whether that's subscribers or open rates or.
I think if you're going for a lot of these newsletter platforms, are public, like advertising boards, right, where you can usually get an advertiser pretty quickly, but you're not going to make very much. So let's say you've got 1,000 subscribers, and it's also best when you have a very specific niche. So let's say you have 1,000 subscribers about golf. A golf club company will pay you a lot of money because they know that your customers will be interested, your readers will be interested in what they're doing, right? If you've got a general publication that's just about lots of different things, it's much harder. And you've also got to think about what's the average buying power of your subscribers. So, example, like Entrepreneur's Handbook is a very valuable audience because most people listening are going to be business owners or people starting their businesses. So, if you've got a SaaS product that you want to sell to business owners, we're a great audience for you. Generally, while you can make money with less than 1,000 subscribers, that's the kind of baseline to make something that's probably worth you even bothering. But let's say 10,000 is where you start being a bit more taken seriously. Once you get to 50,000, 100,000 kind of milestones, that's where it's like serious full-time income and you can make a living just off your newsletter. So one example I can think of is a guy called Michael Hook, who we're going to get on the podcast pretty soon. He charges roughly about $2,000 per newsletter for all of his different sponsor slots. And if he might have got 4 a week, 4 a month even, then that's 8K per month just from writing a newsletter, right? So if you can hit those, and I think he's got about 35,000 subscribers. So that's the kind of thing that's possible. And I think I do the same mistake, right? Is that if you just really focus on building a newsletter, you can really hit those targets pretty quickly because you're spending a lot of time on very high quality content. When it's an afterthought, and I've done this in my own newsletters and made that mistake, you're just kind of in limbo where you're spending the time doing it, but you're not doing enough to actually reach a tipping point. And I think that's the situation you want to avoid, where the best thing is to get started on a newsletter, to get it going, but then start deciding how seriously you want to take it. If you want to be a full-time newsletter creator, you've got to really put in the hours to get to that good, right? And I think it's quite deceiving, say, for people like Dan Coe, right? He can make a ton of money from his newsletter, but he's put in the hard yards, he's put in a lot of work to get to where he is today, where he doesn't need to work many hours. So that's the challenge is if you're going to start today, it's not going to happen overnight, but there is the potential if you put the work in and really focus on something which stands out in the market for you to make quite a lot of money. And to get to kind of Milk Road sort of level, that's where the daily newsletters come into play. So the Hustle, Morning Brew, Milk Road, they are worth so much because they're daily newsletters. So if you're sending a high quality newsletter every single day, then your potential for money is way, way higher. But obviously, most people can't do a daily newsletter unless you've got a team behind you or it is your full-time gig. And starting with a weekly newsletter, it's got to just be measured in how much money you think you can make from it. So you can't be thinking I'm going to do an email once a month and make Milk Road level money from it. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah, of course. I think when we started writing about the same time, right? Maybe late 2016, early 2017 or something like that.
January 2020, so I'm late to the game.
Oh, you're sure later, yeah. When I was starting, the technique for a newsletter was always so make content, maybe that's Medium, and then you were to link to a free product that you made, maybe a infographic, an ebook, and that's how you drove subscriptions. But I noticed with places like Beehive and certainly around writing across now in Substack, referrals are becoming a big thing. Do you think that strategy still plays out? That you need to be given email subscribers a reason to subscribe, or that your content is enough. And then your networking with these referrals can be the sort of thing that drives your engagement and your growth.
I think the challenge was that with the ebooks and the freebies, they've got to be actually valuable. And a lot of people got wise to the case of, I signed them to this newsletter, the freebie isn't as good as they said it was going to be. I've then wasted my time. So there's a bit more, people don't necessarily need it as much to actually convince people to subscribe. But it's where somebody's got a track record, I think, makes a difference, where you see a lot of people who've got big LinkedIn followers, Twitter followings, they're able to make a lot of newsletter subscribers because people can see they're consistent. They know that they're going to get what they deliver on. Then referrals, I think, is a huge thing, right? Because if somebody you trust recommends somebody else, then you're likely to like their content as well. And it's the nature of anybody who's reading a newsletter is a newsletter reader. So a referral is going to somebody who's already in the same, like you're preaching to the choir rather than trying to convince somebody who doesn't normally subscribe to newsletters to subscribe. So it's a lot easier to get the subscribers in that way. And it's all about content, right? If your content is good enough, then people stick around. I think sometimes now it's quite easy to get subscribers in some ways, but will they stick around? Will they open your emails? And that's the hard bit.
Yeah, definitely the hard bit. And that's the bit that sponsors want to know is working, right? Your open rate.
Yeah. And yeah, that's always the challenge now, because like I said, people got so many different things going on. Can you make the newsletter interesting enough for people? So, for example, Morning Brew and The Hustle, they're quite long newsletters every day, but I will read it every day because I know it's going to be good. So I think sometimes you need to be concise, which you do. But if you've got content that people know is going to be consistently good, they're going to read it anyway. But I'd advise somebody starting out to start a shorter newsletter just to make it less friction for somebody to start reading. Do you have any other major points on newsletters, or we can start to wrap up?
I'm just going to say that I think another thing people need to remember is it's not necessarily the number of subscribers, right? It's like how engaged your audience is. And on that point of Morning Brew, all my emails this morning came with a new box highlighted in red that was basically asking everyone to click on it to say they were still an engaged subscriber. And if they don't by the end of the month, they're going to be removed from that segment of Morning Brew's email. So I wonder if behind the scenes they're looking to do a bit of pruning and sort of maybe behind the scenes it's not as high an engagement rate as we would think, just because they're so successful.
Yeah, I think the pruning side of things is really interesting too, because a lot of people focus on the overall number, like you said. But if you've got a really high number, so let's say you've got 50,000 subscribers, but you only convert 5 people, then your sponsor is going to realize something is up there, and you then damage that relationship, right? If you're not able to deliver, you're then going to have to put down your prices anyways. There's no point in having a big list that's disengaged. You might as well have a smaller list, but say, look, when I send out an email, at least 100 people are going to click on your link. But
yeah,
I think
we're going to meet in our words, I think, right? We're 3 letters into our new Beehive email list, so we'll see where we stand in 6 months, whether we're a success case. Hopefully a success case.
Yeah, touch wood. So thanks everyone so much for listening today. We're signing out now, but make sure you check out all the links in the show description and make sure you read the actual Medium publication too. But take care.
Cheerio, bye-bye.